Hi, everybody. As you know, this meeting is recorded and will be uploaded to public internet. So chances are whatever you say in this meeting will remain for a very, very long time. With that, let's start the meeting. I have a few items that I would like to speak about, and then you guys can have question, comments um, in between or after them. So the first item is that we plan to graduate component config for the scheduler to beta in 1.16. But unfortunately, I don't think we can do that. The main reason is that component config does not allow us to have optional fields for certain fields. There are some fields which are currently pointers, I believe, but there are a few, quite a few actually, that are non-pointers. So for those, it's almost impossible, not almost, it's actually impossible to find whether they are not provided or they have like a value which is the same as the default nillable, default nil value in Go. For example, for bool, if you don't specify bool, by default it'll be false in Go. If someone provides a false, you cannot say whether this field was not provided or it was explicitly set to false in the code. This actually caused us a problem recently. Someone asked us to enable profiling for the scheduler by default. And when I looked at the code, I thought, okay, we can enable it by default. But I realized that if I check for like whether profiling is set to false or not, and then set it to true, it's not going to work because someone might actually explicitly have set it to false. And we cannot say whether this field was not provided or it's actually false. So yeah, so for that reason, actually, even before I do this, Justin Santa Barbara had sent a KEP and an issue saying that all the component config fields must be nillable so that we can identify, basically they should be pointers so that we can identify whether they are actually nil, which is equivalent to not provided, or have a value. So we need to wait for that to happen, and then we can promote component config of the scheduler to beta. This will probably happen in 1.17. This is a little unfortunate because we have, we kind of already have deprecated other types of config, like the flags for the scheduler, and yet the alternative is still not even beta. It's still in alpha version. We need to make sure that this is graduated to beta as soon as possible, but it's not going to happen in 1.16.
Yeah, I have one comment here. So speaking of the deprecated flags, so basically right now we have the old-fashioned deprecated flags via -- right? And also another component config options, which is wrapped into one component config file. So basically, if people, for example, people use the old-fashioned -- kubeconfig and also use some options in the component config, for example, on the, like other priorities, then our scheduler will report error, says we don't, internally, we don't respect the deprecated flags if we use the component config. The special typical case is the -- kubeconfig. I saw some people open an issue on that, so I just recommend them to move the -- kubeconfig into the component config. But maybe we can internally, override the kubeconfig value inside the config if the people give the deprecate. I'm not sure that's a correct decision, or maybe in the future we just deprecate all the deprecated flags.
So the flags, the plan of the future is that we are going to deprecate and remove all those command line flags. And we are going to stick with the component config. The problem is that, I mean, if someone already wants to provide component config file, why do they mix it with, well, like command line
Yeah,
file?
so it needs the people to be aware of our philosophy to have this, but somebody doesn't have the knowledge. So
Yeah, to be honest, in some of these situations, since they are making a change and then they see that this problem happens, it's not like they are rolling out a version and suddenly their clusters break. It's more like they make a change and they are probably monitoring and supervising this change, and they realize that there is a breakage or the scheduler does not come up. In these cases, I prefer actually an error to be thrown and things not work, as opposed to trying to tolerate the problem, because this way at least users will know how will become aware of the problem and will fix it, instead of just staying with something which is not recommended and could cause problem in the future.
yeah, makes sense to me. I just bring up this question for your awareness.
Oh, no, yeah, thanks. We should actually tell them that they should probably, in the case that they want to use some component config, they should move all of their configuration to the component config file. All right. Is there any other questions or comments about component config? Okay. So next item is that I actually want to bring up this question and see what you guys think. I was, initially the plan was to graduate our scheduling framework to beta in 1.16. In fact, what I had mentioned in that KEP for the scheduling framework was to have the extension points implemented in order to make it to beta. We can definitely do that. I think we're almost there already. Maybe one of these extension points is left to be done. But I feel like our API may not be as stable as we want. I have a feeling that once we start changing our predicates and priority functions and try to build more plugins, and users also build more plugins, we will get more feedback about making certain changes to our interfaces for extension points. And if we now promote things to beta, we have to stick with these interfaces, the existing ones, for at least a couple of releases, and then we will be subjected to all the backward compatibility that comes with a beta version API of Kubernetes. For that reason, I feel we should keep scheduling framework as an alpha version in 1.16, and maybe promote it to beta in 1.17 once we have a little more clarity and our confidence about our interfaces is higher. What do you guys think?
I completely agree. I think we need to let it sink for some time. Try a few plugins, and maybe perhaps if I make progress on the roadmap as well, gives us more clarity whether the current interface is sufficient or needs some tweaks. I don't think we have any pressing needs to graduate it to beta. It's not necessarily like a customer-facing feature that someone outside is waiting for it. It's mostly internal restructuring the whole scheduler.
I know that there are a couple of companies who are impatiently waiting for it, actually. But we respect that and we understand that. But I don't think we can actually. In fact, if we graduate things to beta and then decide to change it, we're going to cause even more trouble for those folks as well. So I think we should actually be more careful and diligent here. We should carefully consider all of our options, and be a little bit more patient here until we have more confidence about our API.
+1.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, great. So I just write it down that you move the framework to beta 117. You can also update update our document, KEP to mention that we have other criteria for graduation to beta. Okay. And one more thing. So recently, actually very recently, like a couple of days ago, or maybe yesterday, but not yesterday, but anyways, very recently, this week, we realized that there is no way for filter plugins to tell us whether a node is infeasible, and after it became infeasible, whether preemption can help it or not. So basically, today we have one single code for infeasibility of nodes, and that's basically just saying that the node is unschedulable. Sometimes this unschedulability can be resolved by preemption, and sometimes it cannot. So currently, our preemption algorithm relies on the very fixed set of these predicates that we have, and has a hard-coded sort of config for these predicates to indicate whether when one of these predicates fail, preemption can help it or not. For example, if a node is tainted, by removing other pods from the node, we cannot really change anything. In another example, if a node is out of resources, removing some pods from the node can free up some resources. Removing some pods from the node can free up some resources and can potentially make a pod schedulable. So you can see that if that taint predicate fails, there is no point in trying preemption. If the resource check predicate fails, we should definitely try preemption. For that reason, we also need for the filter plugins to somehow tell us whether preemption can help them or not. Right now we have a fixed set of predicates. In the future, after the framework comes, we don't know what kind of filters are enabled in customer clusters. Also, various users of Kubernetes may have implemented their own filters. So for that reason, there are a couple of proposals to solve this problem. One is that a filter plugin, instead of just returning a single unschedulable code, can return more than just one code. For example, it can return unschedulable and something like hopelessly unschedulable. So the hopelessly unschedulable means that you cannot do anything about this. So this is unschedulable, and removing pods from the node is not going to help. You have to wait for some other things to happen, basically. That means we should retry scheduling the pod, but we should not try preemption. The other code could be just unschedulable. Unschedulable means that you can try preemption. And with that, then the scheduler can decide to try preemption or not. Basically, if all the filters for a particular node has returned only unschedulable, then the scheduler will try to preempt pods to see if it can schedule the incoming pod. Another idea is that we can have a config similar to basically in the same place as the filter plugin, as the other plugins. And that config can tell us basically which filter plugins are preemption can help them, and which filter plugins cannot be helped by preemption. The nice thing about this approach, the second approach, is that we don't need to have multiple codes for each pod, but at the same time, it can limit us a little bit, because all these plugins must be statically configurable. So if they do things, I don't know, some you can come up with all kinds of examples. But if they make some decisions sort of like dynamically, and based on those dynamic decisions, preemption can help them or not, we cannot really reflect that in the config. So yeah, that was, I actually created an issue for this. There are a couple of comments there. I believe most people lean towards the first option, basically having another code like unschedulable and hopelessly unschedulable kind of code that is configurable per pod. What do you guys think? I don't know if I have been clear enough and I've described the problem clearly, but if you understand it, please let me know which is your preference.
I think the first option looks good, Bobby, whatever you have suggested. The other assumption that we have there is assuming that the clusters are static in nature, like the labels or the taints are not removed or added to the node. Is that a fair assumption is the question that I have.
No, clusters are definitely not static, but I don't know why that question is related to the problem that you're
So for example, when we are trying the preemption for the next time, we would go through the same predicates, right? And by the time, the second time, the taint could have been removed on the node or something could have happened, right? But if we are...
But well, we don't need to do preemption for that. I mean, the scheduler is going to retry scheduling a pod, which is unschedulable indefinitely until it finds a node for it, right? So preemption is not needed for the case of checking again. It's just a rescheduling of that pod, which is going to happen anyway.
Okay, so to be clear, we are not going to take any action depending on the status code. We are just going to return the status code. Like we are still going to retry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, retry is going to be there. I mean, that hopelessly unschedulable is basically for this particular scheduling cycle, it's hopeless. We cannot do anything about it.
Okay, got it. Yeah, then
that's my concern about this approach. It's nice that it's flexible, but it might be like a kind of forms the way that we use it. And at the end of the day, this is an optimization more than anything else. Like it doesn't implement specific semantics. It's just whether we want to skip evaluating that predicate when we do preemption. And that's why like I'm leaning towards, I'm on the fence. Sometimes I'm on this one, other times I'm like in the static configuration. But right now I'm thinking about it again, having it as static config, like even with the plugin itself, we can say there's some configuration in the plugin itself when you create it, whether this predicate, whether we should reevaluate this predicate on preemption or not. Having it in the code scattered, I feel it might be a source of bugs, especially in the case where you make a dynamic decision and like the state is not clear, and then you miss basically evaluating the predicate when you should. But yeah, I guess that's my, I'm not gonna say that, I'm not gonna veto anything or say like definitely not.
That's a fair point.
I'm leaning towards the static configuration more than anything. But
yeah. So yes, for the information of others to understand why this is just an optimization. So yes, Abdullah is right. This is just an optimization. All plugins or all filter plugins can be conservative and say, always try preemption, right? Even if, for example, they fail for a taint, they can say, yeah, try preemption. Of course, preemption is going to try and it's not going to solve the problem. So we are going to do some wasted work, but we're not going to basically make any logical error if we try preemption, right? So basically, even if all the filters are considered as resolvable by preemption, we are not going to make any incorrect decision. This is basically just an optimization to avoid preemption when it's not going to help. So yes, for that reason, I agree with Abdullah that this might increase our complexity, both for plugins as well as in our code base. And of course, plugins could potentially make this mistake, and if they incorrectly set the code to, for example, hopelessly unschedulable, then preemption will not happen, and this actually could cause a bug. Because if preemption is not tried, the pod is not going to get scheduled, so that could be actually a problem for some of our users. Yeah, so I agree with you. We should all think a little bit more. Maybe that config option is a better option.
I think it's the safest because it's in one place and we can always make conservative decisions about it.
Yes. Okay.
It's how those plate, by the way.
Yeah. So in terms of arriving to a decision, this would be a pull request to the cap, to the existing cap? Or how is this?
For making the change to the cap?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, eventually we should update that cap and indicate our decision on how we are going to treat these unschedulabilities.
Mm-hmm. I honestly don't feel like choosing between one or the other is less of a source of bugs. I believe the other way, that it's cleaner. It's a cleaner interface to go with option one, so that every plugin can make the decision, and also if someone has a custom scheduler, it's easier for them to register this. They don't have to register their plugin as being printable or not.
I think to the contrary, like you're bleeding the fact that the framework is trying to make an optimization into the plugin implementation, and that is that's bad for separation of concerns. Like this optimization is outside the plugin, but the plugin is making a decision about the optimization, and that's wrong.
But so, the scheduler doesn't know whether or not the new plugin.
The plugin, I mean, one way or the other, the plugin is kind of making that decision. I mean, whether we put it in the config file or in the plugin, it's kind of still the plugin or the plugin writer who makes that decision. One nice thing, of course, about this is that, you know, when you create a plugin, let's say that you have received a plugin from somewhere on the internet and you're installing this plugin for your system, right? You don't need to know what you need to put in the config file. The plugin takes care of this for you. This is if we go with option one, which is like basically you don't need to put anything in the config file. So the plugin is going to take care of this for you. In the second case, whoever installs the plugin has to provide the right configuration, or at least has to refer to the documentation of the plugin to find what is the right config for the plugin. So there are some pros and cons for both of them. In certain ways, one may work better, and the other one may work better. So there is no single winner here. Like, there is no clear winner here. Each one of them has their own pros and cons. But yes, I guess we all should think a little bit more to see which one makes more sense.
Yes, I think another aspect of option one is that there is the assumption that the plugin itself can make a decision on whether preemption will help or not. I'm not sure if that assumption is always true in different configurations or different combinations of plugins.
So the plugin can always be conservative and return unschedulable, right? So and also similarly for the config, we can always be conservative, and we always consider a plugin as resolvable by preemption.
Example, like you download a plugin from the internet, as the operator, you can with the config option, you can, based on all your combinations of the plugins, you can configure this plugin to have a conservative decision or not. Whereas if you put that in the plugin retain status, you have no way to change that.
Yeah, but I don't think it's really necessary to change it. I mean, if a plugin knows what to do and it's written correctly, then someone who does not know about the internal logic of the plugin does not need to really configure it and like to decide basically whether preemption is going to help it or not. The plugin writer knows himself.
Question is the assumption that does the plugin always know? Does the plugin?
I mean, when the plugin is not 100% sure, it should be conservative and return like unschedulable only, basically resolvable unschedulable, right? So so that's why what I meant by if a plugin is written correctly, then that should not be a concern.
Fair enough.
Just list pros and cons, and then we can discuss it.
Okay, so I guess I have linked that issue to our meeting notes. Feel free to go and take a look and leave more comments. Please think about it a little more. This is an important thing that we should address. We have a couple more minutes if there are questions or comments from other folks in the room.
I have a question around the. Sorry, wait, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you go.
Okay, so I have a question around the scheduling policy that we started some time ago. Like Yastridge and someone else, I think, have started. Do we have plans to like continue that, or what's the current status of that?
Well, we kind of deprioritized it because we didn't get enough feedback from users, really. There were a couple cases that some folks came back to us and said, yeah, this is going to be useful, but they were not super enthusiastic about them. So we felt like maybe there were not that much interest. So we deprioritized it, but definitely we can revisit that if there is interest.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things that on the OpenShift side that we are trying to look at is how can we use RBAC, especially for tolerations. Like anyone as of now can submit a toleration for master change so that pods could land on that node. Like previously, we used to have something like a carry plugin in OpenShift, which ensures that most of the pods would land onto the compute nodes, not on the master nodes. But with the recent move, we are making master schedulable. But one of the problems that we are noticing is anyone can make the master, or anyone can run their pods on master nodes if you make them schedulable. So that's what the problem is, kind of. And we wanted to solve it using RBAC. So we kind of created a virtual API group for tolerations, and then we told that if a service account has got a role and a role binding, which allows the tolerations as a resource to be accessible, only that particular service account will have, or only that pod which has the service account mounted will have enough tolerations, or it will be able to land onto the master node. I just want to know, is the policy-based approach is something that we have agreed upon and we are going to move forward, or other alternatives are fine with?
We have not agreed on the API design. There is a KIP out there, and Yasin, as you noted, was working on it, but it's now it's kind of like in the back burner. We can definitely revisit and resurrect that KIP and continue working on it towards like the next release of Kubernetes 1.17. One more thing that I would like to add is that I believe there is an alpha feature called toleration restrictions or something like that, which actually tries to address the problem that you mentioned.
Yeah, so that I believe you're talking about pod toleration restrictions admission plugin. The main problem there, I think Avesh wrote the initial version, and at that point of time, the thinking was quite different. We wanted to ensure that for a particular namespace, we would like to have a certain tolerations being available, and if there is a conflict, we are going to deny the pod admission. If not, we are going to merge the tolerations that are available for namespace with the tolerations that the pod has on the pod spec. But now it's even there we do not have some sort of a role-based access control where we are telling we are anyway whitelisting certain namespaces using that admission plugin, saying that only these namespaces are allowed to have certain tolerations. It's not like a generic enough solution that can solve these problems.
No, it's great actually. I believe this is a problem that many of users are probably facing. We didn't hear a lot from many of them, but I can imagine as we go towards having more serious multi-tenancy in Kubernetes, this is going to become a bigger problem for many users. So it's great that there is some interest in this. I would be happy to support continuing the work on this, and you guys are more than welcome to resurrect that thread and allocate resources to it.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Sure. Wei, did you want to say something?
Oh, I just want to mention that the event post spread has almost finished. Yeah, including the integration test. Oh, that's the last one, and have went to a consensus. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you so much for your efforts, and thank you for all the reviewers.
Yeah, there is some minor stuff needs to consider. I will maybe raise some issues for brainstorming. One thing I'm thinking about is that if a pod is explicitly non-schedulable, for example, use kubectl 10, no, not 10, drain, yeah. If a user drain a node, the node will be marked as unschedulable. I mean, the spec down unschedulable becomes true. So in that case, should or shouldn't the event path spread consider that node?
That's a great point. Yeah, in those cases, if I want to say something, I would say no, you should not consider that node.
Yeah, that's also my preference. So in that case, I need to add some code to tolerate this case. And comparing to this case, there's another case, node become tainted. In that case, we won't consider it. That we will still consider that tainted node as a node to calculate the event path spread, right?
Yeah, I guess taints are different from like. Although I guess draining a node these days may happen with taints as well, right?
Yeah, drain is both taint and spec unschedulable equals true.
Yeah, it's a combination of both, unschedulable and taint.
I see. Yeah, so if a status is unschedulable, like I would say we should not consider it. For taints alone,
for taint, we still think of it as common predicates as well as other ones. So still following current logic.
Yeah, but that's a good point. I mean, at the very least, we should definitely document this in our documents. And of course, this feature is still alpha, so we can get more feedback from our users and see whether we should change this behavior in our next releases or not.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank you very much. We are 6 minutes over time. Is there anything else? All right. In that case, let's finish the meeting. I will see some of you folks next week. Bye.